show you how to do the festive hanging towel. The first thing you want to do is cut out the centerpiece. So I've got my interfacing on my main piece and then my other piece cut out. Now I'm going to take a fabric marking pen and I've cut out the center here of the uh, opening, and I'm just going to use my fabric pen to mark where this rectangle opening is. And that will be our stitching line for our zigzag to do our opening here in just a little bit. So now I'm going to take my two pieces and I'm going to put them right side together. So where I just drew, and then I'm going to stitch around. Okay, so I'm just stitching the front and the back of the hanging towel topper together. And I'm just going to go around the edge here all the way to the opposite side, and then I'll trim my threads. All right, so now I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to clip around the round edge here of the towel topper, and that's just going to help me so when I turn the topper right side out, the seam will sit flat, and it'll give it a nice curve. If I don't clip it, it'll still work, but sometimes the seam ends up a little wonky. The clips just allow those stitches to lay flat and give it that nice rounded edge. So now just turn it right side out, and then I'll press it nicely so that everything is nice and flat and as crisp as I can get it. Next, I'm going to change the stitch length and the type of stitch on my machine. So I'm going to change my type of stitch to a zigzag, and then I'm going to change my stitch length all the way down to a 1. If you can go smaller, that's fine, because we're going to make a satin stitch to make these the opening for the hanging towel. If you aren't familiar with what a satin stitch is, this is kind of what it looks like. It's just a really close together zigzag. I'm turning my corners and just making a box. If you wanted to, you could make a buttonhole and just make it a really big buttonhole. That would be just fine. But that's all that satin stitch is that the pattern's asking you for. It's just a really long zigzag that's close together. So we've got our box sewn. Now we're going to fold our ends about a 1/2 inch up on each side, so it's kind of circular around, and then we'll press them down so they're nice and flat, trying to make everything as even as we can. And remember, it's not about being perfect, it's about doing the best that you know how. Especially when you're a beginner, you want to have everything perfect, and it doesn't always work like that way, and that's okay. Now we're taking our towel. I've cut it in half, so this is just half a towel. I also like it at 3/4 of a towel, but it's up to you. You're going to stitch your stitch length back to a straight stitch, and you want it to be long. This is called a basting stitch. So I've set my machine stitch length to a 4 on my machine. Yours might be different in numbering, but I'm going to do 2 sets of lines. You can see I'm lining it up right on the edge of the presser foot, and I'm going to do a long basting stitch down the top. Okay, and then when I cut my threads here, I want to cut them long so I'm able to pull them, and that's actually going to make my gathers. Now I'm going to do my second line of stitching to make perfect gathers, and this time I'm going to line my presser foot up with the stitch that I just made. So I'm just doing again another basting stitch all the way down the top of this towel. Get to the end, pull my threads long, and clip them. And now the fun part. You can already see it's starting to gather, but I'm going to take my two threads, one of my top thread and one of my bottom threads, just the front or the back, and I'm going to pull them slightly, and this is what gathers the towel. So that's how you make gathers. It's super simple. I'll also put a link in the comments to another video that's specifically about how to do gathers. So once I've gathered my towel, I'm going to just stuff it inside the towel topper. Okay, and those gathering threads, I just kind of squeeze them in there too. Okay, you can clip them. I don't like to clip them when I'm just hiding them like this because I don't want to ruin my gathers. In most instances, like if you were doing a skirt or something, you could then pull that basting stitch out and just remove it so it's not in the way. But in this case, we're just going to tuck them right underneath. Now I'm ready to sew all the way around my towel topper. Make sure you've switched your machine back to a regular stitch length before you stitch. You don't want to have a basting stitch because then it can easily be snagged or fall out. So I'm just going along the base first so that those two sides of the towel topper go together. And if you didn't want to top stitch around the entire towel topper, that would be fine. You could just do this straight line and be done, and it would look just as nice. But sometimes it looks really nice to go all the way around that curve and put what we call a top stitch on the towel. So again, that's totally up to you. It's an option. Either one will look nice. Okay, once I get to the end, I'm going to back stitch again, remove my towel, clip my threads. Okay, there's my towel so far. Now we're going to open up our little buttonhole, if you will. You can use a seam ripper, you can use clips. I start with a seam ripper and then I'll take a small pair of clips and clip the rest of the way because I don't want to accidentally go crazy with my seam ripper and then go through my stitching and ruin everything because experience, done that before. So I'm just going to clip all the way close to the end here of my little rectangle. Now it's open. Now let me show you how to hang it. All right, I've got my towel and I'm going to pretend this dowel is my oven handle. So I'm going to flip my towel, go under my oven handle, through the hole, and pull my towel through. See how I did that? And then my little flap here, I just kind of adjust. And there's my cute little towel topper. There's my fox. There's my towel. Now, like I said at the beginning, this is a half of a towel. You could do 3/4 of a towel and then it would hang longer. And if you had a design like the fox, you could see it better. But it really is a great little towel. Hangs great. I think you're going to love this project.